So somebody swapped out the current I was on yesterday. And what's going on right now is I have a background check that's running, and I have some sort of biological test going on connected to me getting, and I know that. Takes a couple of days, I guess, to process the results. And I've gone through this before. As a matter of fact, in the spring of 2016, Barack Obama released an executive order concerning reconfiguration of the national security establishment that was actually a form of genetic engineering. He actually realigned and recomported radio frequencies connected to people that had already been genetically engineered after their original DNA sequences had been stripped and reprogrammed. And he recalibrated it in the spring of 2016. I also understand that specific executive order was connected to changes that occurred in the summer of 2017, specifically connected to an incident that I was witness to in San Antonio, Texas. And I mention that because right now something similar is going on. And somebody did this thing where they programmed into my DNA a fatal strain. What I saw yesterday from the Federal Reserve, that A, codes it to 13, and B, puts me at the tail end and then says that I am not to be considered. You don't have time for me. It's not the right jurisdiction. You can't help me. This has been going on at the very least since the spring of 2016 when that executive order was put into effect. And what it did is there were a number of agencies, including agencies that had specific people in leadership at the time that had a particular racial or demographic profile associated with them. And then it's basically assigned accounts, biometric accounts, based on contrived, racialized biometric indicators to a sort of reconfiguration, a sort of reknitting of the strand. And it literally got programmed into certain people's DNA. I saw it. I saw what it was like for me fitting my whatever racial demographic profile is. By the way, I don't list that on any information. I don't list what my ethnicity is. I may list my gender. It's none of your business if I had a disability. It's none of your business what I consider or what I know my racial or ethnic background to be. It's none of your business. I know in your economy, it's considered to be a currency. You don't pay me for it, and you don't acknowledge whether or not I might share it with somebody else, so I'm entitled to the kind of compensation you might want to give them. I've never had a DNA test. I refuse to get it. I think it's racist. But at the same time, about a year later, I found that executive order and I understood because I was real time aware of it happening, what it meant, and was able to deduce and understand that they literally were genetically engineering people through executive order, at least in the spring of 2016. I was witness to it. And what it did is it programmed subroutines and concurrent or contradictory subroutines so that you have these completely racialized encounters with people. I'm literally so isolated now. I got one person to talk to, a senior, white man, good Texas stock, right? That's what you left on my DNA. Every other in person conversation I attempt to have has already been programmed. And I'm supposed to believe it has something to do with intelligence, but it doesn't. What it was about programming people to be compliant with the dominant regime, and people that were dissenters were deemed to be non compliant and hence were meant to be invisibilized and disappeared. And we're supposed to assuage ourselves that our demonstrations of loyalty to traitors is somehow about serving some sort of intelligence aim. And if we get too hanky about it and try to assert our intellectual property rights, then they just chalk it up to artificial intelligence. That's bullshit. It's communism. It's not the kind of communism you want to talk about, ideal society, we're going to go there together, at the end of the rainbow, pot of gold shit. It's none of that. This is the kind of stuff that they have a special select standing committee of Congress. That is still in effect, by the way. They never decommissioned it. It's a standing committee. It's still going on. There's other standing committees that could have worked with it, but it would seem that they were more interested in making fetish porn in the basement. So we got to deal with it on our own. Let me just put a little context here. Just like before, I was genetically engineered as a part of some completely treasonous deal hooked up by somebody allegedly qualified to be in political office, which, by the way, there are disputes on. There is at least one, if not two, writs quo warranto that were requested to challenge the authenticity of Barack Obama's birth origin in order to establish himself as an American citizen fit to actually run for president. And I just want to say, A, it makes a difference when it's members of the military that are launching that writ or launching that effort without a lawyer. And B, it makes a difference whether or not he was legitimately born in the United States, because if he was qualified to be president and he was actually born in another country, then that's the kind of thing that we should have addressed forthrightly, because several of the presidents of the United States of America were not born in the United States of America. All it shows is that someone had a bad faith effort to engage the political process in a matter of undermining the very establishment and the very institutions they purported to represent. So it shouldn't have mattered whether or not. If he was qualified to be president and he happened to be born in another country, there's actually constitutional precedent that could actually challenge the mandate. He has to be a born citizen of the United States. But that's not what ended up happening. What ended up happening was some other long-term agenda that had been effectuated by a group of elite that thought that they were above the law and thought they had the cover of God or whatever else they thought that they had cover in their ass. That had every intention of trying to bankrupt us, including genetically. And that form of misrepresentation of intent is not unique. Please remember, for everybody that likes to get all nostalgic about the Soviet Union, it wasn't the Bolshevik Party that did the work. As a matter of fact, the Bolshevik Party first had to come in and repress, suppress, and appropriate the work that had already been done by others in what came to be later the Soviet Union. The Soviets were not developed by the Bolsheviks. Remember, most of the Bolsheviks' leadership was in exile at the time. You have kind of a different perspective on what's considered palatable as a form of acquiescence when you're in exile. And you have a very different consideration of what it means to have been involved with creating Soviets, only to have a bunch of hanky foreigners say that they had a right to claim what was yours without doing the work, without being there, and then telling you you're supposed to just sit there and parrot their propaganda. That's the communism I'm talking about. Now, there is a former Supreme Court Justice of the United States of America, Justice Jackson, who actually defined communism. There were 6 tenets that defined communism. Primary among them is that it was a violent junta seeking to dispossess people of their political rights. Make no mistake about it. That's exactly what we're dealing with right now. And it's not only a violent junta, but it's a violent junta that is so insidious, it won't even admit it's using violence. It wants us to think we're sick and that they need us, right? They need us to be, there to help them. This is the premise. You need us. You need us to help you and to take care of you. You're sick. They won't even acknowledge they're using violence.